Rangers fans, welcome to season 4 of Liberty Blue, the essential New York Rangers podcast sponsored by Believe Network. I'm Andrew Chelney alongside Nick Zararis. And Nick, I'm starting a petition so that every remaining Rangers home game is just played on the road. I feel like this would be easier for everybody involved, and the Rangers are going to win, 60 games. I think that's plausible. I think that's fair for everyone. Maybe James Dolan won't like that idea, but everyone else should be on board. What do you think?
So it's funny you say that, because whenever you read the histories of the Rangers, especially that original six era up through the 60s, or I believe it was the late 60s is when this was a problem still. They used to not play home games in the postseason because the circus was a bigger draw. Like the Ringling Brothers Circus would come to Madison Square Garden for the entire month of April or May. So the Rangers would play their playoff games on the road in the postseason, no matter whether or not they had home or away advantage in those series. And at this point, this is as, I would say, funny if it wasn't so ridiculous. But it's hilarious. This team goes out and plays pretty well against a good Blue Jackets team on Saturday night. They play really well defensively, low scoring, low event game. And then Sunday night, they go out there and they look like they had not played together before. That was about as disjointed, ugly an effort as you're going to get. And Detroit isn't bad, but Detroit also isn't a good hockey team. Detroit should not be doubling you up on shots on goal. That is a real red flag alarm bell going off there. And kudos to Quick for playing his ass off in a game that could have gotten
He was great.
out of
He was
hand.
the only Ranger that was playing for the vast majority of that game.
He was the only reason that game doesn't get incredibly out of hand is the effort Quick gave. Granted, if you want to do the officials conversation, whatever, they were egregious in both directions. That's so fine. I have no problem with that. But at the same time, even if, Detroit got 3-4 more power plays than you did, you still got thumped. This was not a close hockey game other than on the final score sheet. And this brings up a very natural question because it feels like every time we sit down to record on a Monday morning afternoon, we're doing extreme pendulum one way or the other. When we sat down here with Arthur 2 weeks ago, we were pretty chipper. They pulled off some nice wins over the weekends. They were starting to feel like they were solidifying themselves. Then they came out and played 2 stinkers in a row. Last week, we came in here talking about, well, where do they go from here? And then they won 3 in a row. And then they lost last night. And now I'm sitting here. I don't know what to make of this group. I know they cannot score with any real consistency, especially at home. I know the defense, though the underlying numbers are good, has an air of fugaziness to it. And when I say that, it's not that I don't think they're playing well. They are. The numbers bear that out, and they are playing good hockey when you watch most of the time. When I say fugazi, it's based on track records. We know what Will Borgen has been the first 6 years of his NHL career. We know what Carson Soucy's been the first 9 years of his NHL career. We know what Vakanainen has been the first 9-8 years of his NHL careers. That was always the proposition here, the question. Could these guys continue to outplay their previous track records, especially their recent histories when you look at the cases of Borgen and Soucy, for the long term? Because if they could, that shows a genuine advantage, an edge that your pro scouting department identified 2 guys who were not depressed assets because the Rangers did kind of pay reasonable or above value to get both of them, but they identified players who were being underutilized, said, we see something there and we can do something with them as far as getting more out of them. And when Soucy and Borgen have been healthy, they have played reasonably well. They don't do anything in terms of tilting the ice offensively, but as long as they're not giving anything away defensively, that's fine. But now we're getting to a point where, being that it is so night and day, Jekyll and Hyde on a given day to day, you have to start asking yourself, what's it going to take? What is it going to take for the light bulb to go on for someone here? And that can't just be Panarin. That can't just be Adam Fox, who have both come on really strong over the last 2 weeks. Trocheck has looked reasonably good since being inserted into the lineup last week. It can't just be 2 or 3 guys here. This is 18 skaters and a goalie every single night. It cannot be incumbent upon one guy to swing all of these games. It's great that Panarin and Fox have gotten going, but you can't only rely on that to be the difference between winning and losing.
So 2 things here before I respond to what you're saying. One, this has to be said, rest in peace to Larry Brooks.
I figured we'd get there at the end. That'll get its own like 5-10 minutes to.
Yeah, I think starting it off with that, I think, is important. I think he was a pillar of the community. I think it's important to highlight that earlier on in the episode. And also, second of all, hopefully Mike Sullivan's okay and his family's okay. Like, I don't know, because he was supposed to coach yesterday. Head coaches tend to do that. And then I think at like 4:30, the Rangers were like, "Oh, actually, he has an emergency, basically, and he's not going to coach." And then Joe Sacco / Rangers legend David Quinn co-coached or whatever that was. I don't like they couldn't flip a coin and just decide who would be the fake coach for last night. They just had to do it together, and it turned out to be whatever that game against Detroit was. So yeah, hopefully Mike Sullivan's okay, or his family's okay, or whatever the situation is. Hopefully that gets resolved quickly. Yeah, this is a team that I have no idea. Like, game in and game out, you just kind of have no idea what's going on. Where they finally win a game at home against Nashville, a team that can't do anything. I mean, they went to Sweden, and they won the first game off of some late game heroics, and then they played the second game and looked like a team that just didn't really want to be there. So yeah, the Rangers finally beat a team that really didn't care, which is good. That's
and
what
they blew them out. You get credit for that. They blew them out. They smoked them. They ran them off the ice.
It was you scored 6 goals on home ice, and you win. Great, always very nice to see that. But, and then you go away and then you beat Tampa Bay pretty handily. And, the first period was a whole bunch of defense optional type of game. It was 7 goals in the first, in the first period. But like in the first majority of the game, like every shot the Rangers were taking, it was going in the net. And it was an insane period. The Rangers hold on. They kind of just level the ship, and they just get the job done, and it was impressive. And then you go to Columbus, who is a good team, and it was tight towards the end, and JT Miller had that shootout winner, and then that was that, and it was good. And a little bit of credence has to go to, okay, well, you're playing on a back-to-back, you just got home from Columbus, and it's a tight turnaround, and you probably didn't get much sleep or whatever. Guys, it's Detroit. Guys, You got outshot like what, 40 something to 20 against the Detroit Red Wings, a team that could essentially employ you and I on the third pairing, or even the second pairing sometimes, and you really couldn't muster like 20 shots. Like that's what you did offensively. And I tweeted this out earlier this morning, and it's apropos of nothing, but it's still important to highlight, and that JT Miller is very hurt, so obnoxiously hurt, and he just needs to sit. He needs to sit and get healthy, because he's not doing JT Miller things. He's actively hurting himself and the team by continuing to play. Because you take a look at this, right? 2 years ago, he scored 100 points. He scored 103 points 2 seasons ago, and this is the same JT Miller. It's not like he's 38 and holding on for dear life. He's a little bit older, sure, but he's still that guy. He's on pace for 36 points this season.
Oh, you rounded down. I gave him 37 on my notes.
Sure. 36. I mean, because here's the thing. He has 4 goals and 5 assists in 20 games, right?
Yeah, 9 points.
So that's 9 points. You do 9 times 4 and you get 36. If you want to add a point, give it 37. I'll be generous. I'll give him 2. Make it 38. Hey, you're JT Miller. You should be scoring more than that anyway, even if you want to be generous or not. You're the top line center, and you're the captain of this team. If you are so hurt to the point that, in a 5-on-5 basis, you are not doing the things that you can do, that we know you can do, that the team knows you can do, because you are being hampered by an injury. If you are, if you're whatever it is, if you cannot move the way that you would want to move out there, take a week. Take 10 days. And it's now that Trocheck is back, that's a little bit easier to do, because the center position isn't as much of an issue as it was when Trocheck was out. If the argument beforehand was, oh, I can't sit out because Trocheck is out and somebody needs to play center, okay, well, Trocheck is back. take some time and heal, because this type of production is not help. Like, the Rangers need scoring help as is. When you're playing hurt and you're not contributing and you're taking up a lot of the ice time because you're JT Miller and you aren't producing at 5-on-5 to the level that everyone knows that you can, it's hurting the team. You have to sit out for a few games here just to get back, I think, because this is not helping anybody. You're on pace to score less than 40 points for a guy that scored over 100 2 seasons ago. This is JT Miller. He's like, he can do this, and yet he's dealing with something, or something's going on, and this is not beneficial to anybody.
So what I would say, building off of that, number one, my assumption is this is the type of injury that isn't going to be worsened by him playing, but isn't the type of injury that is going to be able to be healed by sitting for a few weeks. My assumption is this is probably something that's going to need corrective surgery at the end of the year. And he can't do that in the middle of the season, because if he sits for 4 or 5 months to heal from a surgery, the Rangers are going to definitively miss the playoffs. And my supposition, and I'm not saying that's the right or wrong thing to do.
Sure.
That's a decision he has to make. But that's that when it comes to something like this, where Miller is clearly not himself. He cannot move. There was a scoring chance last Monday in the Nashville game where he got the puck at the blue line, ready to attack the offensive zone, and just didn't try and explode and didn't try and drive the net. He gained the offensive zone, he pulled out to the wall, and he waited for reinforcements to come instead of trying to facilitate the breakaway scoring chance, because he knew he couldn't pull away from the ensuing defenders behind him. The way he struggles to move laterally is a real tell. There's a problem there, that he's often reaching with his stick as opposed to moving his feet. He is still making an effort. He is still trying.
Sure.
But at a certain point, as you said, for him to be on pace for 37 points when last year on a bad team he played at a point per game pace tells you that this is a diminished version. And there are some indicators here. I would point to the power play at large being bad, tanking everybody's counting stats slightly. I think if the power play is a little bit better,
they've scored power play goal in each of their past 4 games, if I'm not mistaken. So at least it's
something
moving
like
in a positive direction.
So they have 9 power play goals in 20 games so far this year. So they're getting better. Granted, as you said, 4 of them in the last handful of games. So 4 over the last 5, and then 5 in the previous 15. Not the best, but signs of life, something in the direction. But as far as Miller goes, the one thing I would say, and something that I was curious about, he is not getting a lot of ice time with Adam Fox, and being that Fox is the only Ranger defenseman capable of tilting the ice in any discernible way, and the Rangers have decided to double up on Panarin with the Trocheck, Panarin, Lafreniere line, it's going to be a lot harder for Miller at the outset. Already diminished player, then he's having to do it with Carson Soucy and Will Borgen, or Carson Soucy and Morrow, and when you don't have that ability to tilt from the back end, it puts so much more of a responsibility on those forwards to really drive the play. And if we're talking about somebody who's a little bit diminished, and Zibanejad, who somehow leads the team in goals, even though it doesn't feel like he's playing particularly well, and Will Cooley, who's oscillated between the third line and the first line, who is starting to pick it up. He scored at home against Nashville last week, which was good to see. But it feels like this group, and I said this last week, and I'm going to reiterate it now and expand on it more. It feels like this team is missing a first line. It feels like they have a second line, a third line, a fourth line, and then a second, fourth line, based on the way the production has gone. Now, if Panarin, Trocheck, and Lafreniere continue to produce the way they are, they're outscoring opponents 9-3 so far this year, which is great. If they continue to produce, okay, maybe we have a conversation. They need a second line, not a first line. But overall, offense-wise, where they are at, they're on pace to finish the year with just 205 goals for the whole team, all situations. A playoff team is generally about 220, 225 in terms of goals. We're talking about a 20-25 goal difference between where they are right now on pace for and where they would expect to be. That means the guys who are here, whether that's Miller getting healthier and performing better, whether that's Trocheck or Lafreniere taking a step on their production where they were last year, Zibanejad getting going, or somebody we're not really accounting for, if that's a Taylor Radish type, what have you. The Rangers are not scoring enough, period. They fundamentally are not. And that has a trickle-down effect, because when you don't score enough, you're in all these close games. And when you're in these 2-1, 3-2 games, all it takes is one thing to go wrong and you lose. And we see this team consistently struggle to get to that 3-goal threshold. They are averaging 2.5 goals per game this year. Now, some of that is heavily skewed by the fact they can't score at home and they score a bunch on the road. But right now, they are a team struggling to score. When you are struggling to score, it puts an increased magnification on their defense and their goaltending. And for now, that is held up. I do not expect that if the responsibility to this degree for winning continues to fall on the defense and the goaltending, they will be able to be competitive to the degree they would like to be.
Here's the thing, and we've been talking about this for about 4 years now on the show, where Shesterkin can be fantastic, Quick can be fantastic. They can't also score goals. Quick was amazing against Detroit. As we said in the outset, Quick was the only player on the ice, it seemed like, for the Rangers for the vast majority of the game. He was making some awesome saves. He was really keeping his team into it. And yet the Rangers really only mustered, a handful of high danger opportunities. They scored. Zibanejad scored that one power play goal, but there wasn't a whole lot of sustained offense throughout most of the game for the Rangers. Nope. And there was a whole lot of, we are scrambling in our own zone trying to survive. And the thing about surviving is that if you're playing a really good team, you can sort of get away with that a little bit more because they're such a good team. But you're playing Detroit, guys. You're playing Detroit. And they're not really all that scary. You just beat them like 10 days ago. Pretty handily, actually. You beat them in Detroit, and it was not particularly close. You kind of just handled business, and you showed not only Detroit, but you showed yourselves that you can beat these guys. So then they come to your home arena and they lap you like that. That's a little embarrassing. It really is. And some of that, and Quick talked about this after the game where, whoever the Detroit player was, he scored into the empty net after the time was over, and then Quick ran out, and it was a whole, debacle. And that great picture was taken of the Rangers blue, home Blues and the Red Wings home Reds, being out there fighting each other. And it was great for the pictures and all that. But part of the reason Quick did that is because he wasn't happy with the team. Like, yeah, of course, some of that is, hey, don't shoot at the empty net after the time is over. Yeah. But a lot of that was, hey, I'm going to show some energy here because no one else has the entire game. And when your backup goaltender has to do that for you in the middle of November at home, there's a problem. And I just, we've been saying, like, this is essentially the same episode that we've had the past 2 months here. At a certain point, is there going to be a change in this script? Because it really feels like we're taking the script from like the past 4 episodes and just redoing it, retelling it, what have you. Because it just feels like the same problems that have been an issue for them, at least at home, are still happening. And yeah, they scored a goal at home. Shocker, like breaking news. They were able to do that. Great, but you didn't play well. You still lost in regulation, and your backup goaltender has to jump off the bench at the end of the game and show some emotion, partly because, he wasn't happy about what happened, but like part of it was because he was the only player that showed emotion that game. And that's a problem. We're in the middle of November. Where is it? Where is it? And when is it going to come?
So what I would say, and building off of that, because you are right, these are the same recurring themes, the same ideas, just in slightly different formats for the better part of the last year and change. And I think I think the more people show you something, the more likely you are to believe that's what they are. And what I wrote down as far as the Quick thing, it shouldn't be incumbent upon the 39-year-old backup goalie to show signs of life. And something I find very interesting, because the Rangers don't really have this reputation of being a hard-nosed, rugged team, anytime one person shows any semblance of emotion or passion, It gets dramatically overhyped. You would have thought Sam Carrick stormed the beaches of Normandy for fighting Matthew Olivier on Saturday night.
He got the
Yeah,
hat.
don't get me wrong. Olivier, toughest guy in the league. You saw what he did to Trent Frederick's face. It's a week later. Frederick still got a black eye and a swollen cheek. Toughest guy in the league. But to talk about that like that was the most brave, that tells you where this team is at, that they know in the aggregate at large, they're not that guy. This group has 2 or 3 guys. You have Carrick, you have Miller to some degree, you have Trocheck to some degree. And when Rempe's here, you have Rempe.
And Quick, I guess.
I guess Quick, but he didn't actually get into a fight. He tried to instigate one, but nobody wanted to.
And also the refs were like, The refs already ruined a bunch of things in that game, and they were like, you know what? Let's just ruin one more thing. Like, and that I tweeted about during the game. Kelly said, like, the refs don't usually talk to media after the game unless there's like a massive thing. Kelly Sutherland needed to talk to the media after the game. There was multiple mistakes for both teams, not even just for the Rangers, for both teams that required lengthy explanations that were just wrong. Like, he just did not have a good refereeing game. And listen, like, that happens, right? Like, Michael Jordan had bad games. Like, these things happen to everybody involved. But come on. Like, he tilted the game in both directions when referees are not supposed to do that. And that was bad. But anyways, I digress.
So on that note, because I do think this is important, and we've talked about this for years, bolting on 2 or 3 tough guys does not make the entire team tough. Until you get a buy-in from everybody about attitude and mentality, all these things are slogans. All these things are ideas. The whole shtick of no BS tells you the problem. If you need the captain of the team to come out and say, we're not going to tolerate BS anymore, and we didn't actually change all that much of the team other than getting rid of Kreider and Miller, K'Andre Miller, that is, what are you hoping to achieve? Do you think fundamentally that at 33 years old, you're going to get Mika Zibanejad to embrace a ruggedness to his game? Do you think Artemi Panarin is? Do you think Alexi Lafreniere is 6 years into his NHL career at this point? You can say all the right things, and that's the thing. And that's why, to some degree, anytime something like this happens, it is to a degree performative. Because it's one guy doing it, and then everybody else gets to feel good about themselves and say, no, we are a tough team. No, we are in the fight. Well, if you constantly need a guy to get into a fight, to motivate you, to fire you up, to realize, oh, things aren't going well, that's not good enough. There needs to be a reasonable baseline expectation for performance that is not tied to these sugar highs. There is a time and a place. Sometimes you do need the fight. Sometimes you do need the big hit to get the energy going. And I was talking about this the other day with someone. That stuff is a lot easier to translate day to day. You can always come in with a good effort. You can always come in with a good attitude. You can play a perfect hockey game, and sometimes the puck's just not going to go in the net. That's the nature of the sport. It's sometimes
Rangers saw a good amount of that at home so far this season.
Sometimes hockey is fundamentally unfair, and you can do all the right things and you won't get rewarded. But there are parts of the game, components to the game, that you can show up with every single game. Energy, intensity, effort, those are non-negotiables. Those should be showing up every single night. It should not require a fight. It should not require an after the whistle scrum. It should not require almost, you think about somebody driving and not really paying attention and then almost running a red light. That's kind of the vibe they're doing right now. They're still on the road, but they're not really paying attention. And that's an intersection, slam on the brake. That's kind of the way the vibe has been this year so far. They realize that what they're doing is not good enough because they're not winning enough of their games. Right now, they're going to be in a dogfight for one of the 2 wildcard spots. In the East, maybe the worst East we have ever seen. I would argue this might be the worst Eastern Conference we have ever seen. Now, Florida and Tampa Bay, very injured. Toronto probably turns it around at some point, what have you. But this is as weak as it's ever been, and the Rangers aren't even getting in it, taking advantage of it. And all of that in conjunction with each other tells you this group still does not have the intangibles. It still does not have the mindset they're going to need to play the way the general manager wants them to, the way the coach wants them to, because they are not scoring enough. They are not playing with the requisite energy and intensity, especially when it comes to playing physically consistently. It's 2 or 3 guys in the whole lineup trying to make up the toughness quota for the entire team. And that tells you this is not a tough team. This is not a team that is built to sustain a real aggressive push. And if you can't score consistently and we can't get the fundamentals consistently and we are relying on a handful of guys to bail us out, that's telling you there isn't enough here. And then, you have games like last week where you win 2-3 in a row, you hang 7 on Tampa, you feel good about it. And I think you are closer to what they have shown at home than what they are on the road in the aggregate overall. That's my opinion. That's what my perspective is. But with two such extremes, the answer probably lies somewhere in the middle, but I think it definitely lies closer to a 92, 93 standings points team. And that's being generous. Like right now, I think they're on pace for something in the ballpark of like 88, 89 standings points, which would definitely miss the playoffs.
I'd be a little more generous to that only because, I would have to think that, okay, they're going to cool down a little bit on the road, but I do think they can't possibly be this bad at home the entire season. So I do think while the points away from MSG are going to tumble slightly, the points at home, surely, right? Sure. I mean, it's the middle of November. I'm still saying the word surely. Surely they start.
Don't call me Shirley.
Right. Okay. All right. Leslie Nielsen. Let's relax over there. But surely at a certain point, the points start to come at home. So I do think that levels out a little bit. And I do think that, 88 is low. I do think 88, 89 points is definitely low for this team. And they do have enough as is to at least get to, 93, 94, maybe even 95 if they, if they would like to get there, which sometimes they play like they want to. Sometimes, like last night, it's like, do you want to? I don't really know if you want to, but and yes, for clarity, these are professional athletes. Yes, they want to. I'm just saying, watching that game from start to finish, where if you want to get to 95, 97, 100 points, okay, well that's a game you got to win. That's really a game where you have to show me, the fan, the media, the GM, the whomstever you want to show that you are serious about, one, making the playoffs, two, about making a statement about, MSG being a tough place to play, because right now it's not, because you only won 1 game in MSG and it's the middle of November, and you're a playoff team that this no more BS thing you're taking seriously, and you're actually here to improve things. That is that was a game that you needed to win, and instead you came out there, you looked flat for the vast majority of the game. You let your backup goaltender out to dry for the entire 60 minutes. So do you want it? You could tell me that all you want, but you got to show that to me on the ice. And against Detroit, you did not. Now, against Tampa, you showed me some of that. Against Columbus, you showed me some of that, and that's good. Against Nashville, a team that you desperately needed to beat because they are just not a good team, you showed me that hey, you finally won a game at home. It took a month. Yay! Great. You got to beat Detroit at home. You got to do it. And listen, if you lose a close game, but there was, multiple opportunities and you hit some posts and, Cam Talbot stands on his head again, like every goalie at MSG has played this season, there's a conversation to be had that isn't this. But given how you played last night, that's not what we're talking about right now. So it just goes to show that, okay, well, you're showing a lot of this on the road, but the same, it's right now, it's same old at home, even though you finally were able to score a goal, which is nice. So that you can't, here's the thing too. And you brought this up a second ago where, in theory, you changed the culture. In theory, you brought in JT Miller. Now you're wearing the no BS shirt, which, you know, the age old meme of, you know, has already been answered a lot of questions that my shirt is answering. But you can't teach intangibles. You cannot teach intangibles. You cannot change the mentality of 30 plus year olds that have been in the league for over a decade over the course of a summer. You can't make them tougher. You cannot change the way that they view the game. But you didn't change the roster. So what is it that you changed? You changed the writing on the shirt. You changed the captain. Okay, cool.
And you changed the coach. Those are your three things.
Sure. But the coach cannot teach intangibles. Nobody can teach you intangibles. You got to want to change those things by yourself, or, you know, either that or that's just got to be ingrained in you from day one. That's just who you are. And, you know, Mike Sullivan's a great coach, but he can't make Panarin a tough guy. That's like that, you know, that would be silly for anyone to want to do, but like that's the idea that I'm trying to highlight is you cannot just take one person who is already above the age of 30 and be like, oh, by the way, this guy that you've been your entire life, oh, how about you turn into somebody vastly different? How about you do some of that you've never done before in your life? Like, why don't you do some of that? It's not feasible to do that. So if you want to change the mentality of the team, you have to change some players and bring in some other ones that have that kind of mentality. You cannot say, oh, here's a bunch of 30 plus year olds that have this one mentality. What if we simply say what if we just simply hang a banner that says, you know, our mentality is different? Okay. But like, is it? Or are you just telling me that? Or are you going to show me that at some point? And granted, like the defense has been a lot better. Right. So even Zibanejad has been noticeably better, especially defensively. The team has the sticks in a lot of the right places. Defensively, the team looks a lot better. However, offensively, you can't score at home. And okay, well, where is that going to come from if your offense, your forwards really aren't contributing, and the only defenseman that can handle the puck without being a hand grenade right now is Adam Fox? Somebody's got to do it. You can't win 0-0.
So I don't know if you're familiar with the movie. It's from the 90s. It's called Kicking and Screaming. It's about four guys who all graduate college at the same time, and they're still living in their college accommodations, their off-campus house, the summer after they graduate. And they're all debating, am I going to go to grad school? Am I going to go travel? What am I going to do with my life? And the entire conceit of the movie is you're still trying to figure out who you are in your early mid-20s. You put together a personality based on observed behavior, stuff you read, stuff you watch, the people you hang out with, the people you don't hang out with, and you start to develop who you are. And very quickly, the thesis of the movie, you start to become something kind of by accident. The stuff around you makes you what you are. And really quickly, you can, even at 23 or 24 years old, start to become kind of defined as to what you are. We're talking about this in regards to guys in their 30s. This is who these guys are. There is no come to Jesus. Think about how hard it is to pick up a new habit at any point in your life. It's something like 6 weeks for something to become a new habit, whether it's the gym, eating better, getting up earlier, going to bed earlier, whatever it is. Think about how difficult it is for us plebes who live normal lives, go to normal jobs. Then try telling a professional athlete who has gotten where they are, 10 plus years in the NHL, the average NHL career is 3.5 seasons, to triple up effectively on the average NHL career, and to have had enough success to get third, fourth contracts in some of these cases, and try and convince these guys that no, what you've done the previous 12 years in the NHL, that doesn't work. That's not good enough anymore. And try and see how easy it is to convince them of that. And that's why they did the guerrilla roster construction last year of, okay, you guys don't want to do it my way? Fine. I'm bringing in JT Miller, and he's going to bully the rest of you into playing better hockey. He's going to bully the rest of you into being tougher. All of that is nice. All of that is great. Until it actually manifests in results It is performative behavior. It is saying all of the right things, but not actually doing it. I can say I want to go to sleep tonight at 10 o'clock and wake up at 6 to work out before work tomorrow. Well, Monday Night Football's on. The Oilers are on. Well, I'm not going to sleep at 10 o'clock. I'm going to end up going to sleep at 1 o'clock, waking up at 8, eating breakfast, and clocking in for work. That's the reality we live in. It is hard to change your habits, and you are not going to get these guys to change all that much about themselves. And they're not playing terribly, but they're also not playing good. And this is an old, expensive team. This is a team that actively sought out to get older and more expensive this summer in the players it acquired. With all of that on the background, they are telling you they still think they're in the mix, that all it's going to take is 2 or 3 good weeks, the light bulb's going to go on, and the new Rangers are just going to show up. That's the project they are effectively telling you, that Mike Sullivan is going to get them playing a style that is going to bring the best out of them. That is going to coax and build confidence in this group that sorely needs it. And that is going to allow for the meta transformation that the general manager thinks is possible. We have heard over and over again over the years, well, if he could get rid of that guy, he could get rid of this guy. I think Chris Drury's ideal team would be 4 lines of 45-point guys somewhere from Western Canada, Minnesota, or Massachusetts. But that's the way the roster's going. They are skewing towards a certain archetype, and those guys don't score a lot of goals. Those guys don't produce a lot of offense. And it's great to be good defensively, but at a certain point, you do need offense. And if that means trading off some defense for offense, that's going to have to be the case. Last night against Detroit, you got both. You got neither. You didn't trade off any defense for offense. You got thumped, and you're lucky it was only 2-1.
And the thing too, we talked about this with Adam Fox being the only defenseman that doesn't handle the puck like it's a hand grenade. You finally dressed Scott Morrow, which before the game, I couldn't believe my eyes. Wait, you're scratching Vakanainen, a bad player, for a guy that might be bad or good in Scott Morrow. Oh my God! Wait, this is the greatest day of my life. This is finally happening. And then you play him less than 10 minutes because you don't trust him, and that happens. Okay. So, and how much of that is Sacco/Quinn deployment? How much of that is a conversation that they had with Mike Sullivan where that would be the plan anyway, even if Mike was behind the bench? I don't know, so, but the fact of the matter is that, okay, well, Scott Morrow is a second defenseman that can handle the puck well. And there was a couple of moments in that game where Scott Morrow had a nice pass or at least a nice, thought, or a nice chance to do so. Maybe got flubbed, or the pass got intercepted. But there was a couple of opportunities where Scott Morrow advanced the puck in a positive way, something that Vakanainen can't do, something that Carson Soucy can't really do, and you reward him by playing him less than 10 minutes in a game that you desperately needed offense. And now again, how much was Scott Morrow going to tilt the ice for the Rangers if he got 3-4 extra minutes? I don't have an answer to that. No one knows the answer to that because that didn't actually end up happening. But when you desperately needed offense and your forwards just weren't doing much of anything, and Adam Fox, try as he might, was trying to do something, and nothing was happening for this team, you got to find it elsewhere. And Scott Morrow could have been the X factor. Again, we don't really know, but it all goes back to the principle that you traded Chris Kreider and you did not replace the goal scoring. So it has to come from somewhere, because you do not win games 0-0. Quick was excellent. He was amazing. He made some really great saves. He really kept this team in the entire game. I mean, Detroit, I think, ended with 42 shots, 41 shots, something like that. And Quick was superb in pretty much every single one of them. I mean, the first goal, if you want to say, okay, he should have had it, I guess. But he made 3 or 4 saves before then that should have went in the net. So, okay, trade the great opportunity that didn't go in for that one that did. You get the same result, if you want to say that. The Rangers need to score goals. Quick had an awesome game, and it turned to nothing because the Rangers could not generate offense, let alone score a goal. And herein lies the problem where, yeah, their defense was better. And besides last night, they didn't play all that well defensively last night. They were just chasing the puck the entire time. But overall, the defense has gotten better, which is great to see. But if you do not score goals, that kind of doesn't matter. You have to still, stop me if you heard this. Like, this is breaking news to you, Nick, but you got to score goals to win hockey games. And until you do that, you're going to get a whole lot of results like that.
So while you were talking, I made this flow chart that I think is going to be very helpful for the rest of the season. If the Rangers won, they're turning the corner. If not, they're a flawed team that needs to retool. That's where I'm at, because every game could be anything. Sure. They can't score one against Detroit, who is bad defensively, who has one good defenseman in Mo Seider, and they score 6 against Nashville, who is bad and has one good defenseman in Brady Shea.
And they scored 7 against Tampa Bay.
And they scored 7 against Tampa Bay against Andrei Vasilevsky. Now, no Hedman, no McDonough, plenty of excuses to give. Vasilevsky tripping over his own feet certainly helps when you want to score goals.
Sure.
The Rangers, for some reason, magically got those goals a lot more than I would expect, considering how cursed this franchise is. But with all of that said, the thing I'm most curious about before we wrap up and we talk a little about Larry Brooks, this schedule is very condensed. With the Olympics in February, it is going to go by like that. We are a week and a half away from American Thanksgiving. In a month, it'll be Christmas. By Christmas, you're going to have a really good idea of what this team is and where they're at. And if they are still this inconsistent, and it's a fair question philosophically, is a team that's inconsistent bad? Well, if they can't consistently be good, by definition, that would make them a bad team. So if we're still at December and they are sitting at, a 510, 520 points percentage, I think we can start to call a spade a spade. By the time we get to the Olympics, you're going to know everything you need to know. And the Olympics seems very far away, late January, early February. That feels forever away from now.
That's 2 months from now, by the way.
It's going to feel like that. It is going to go by in a blink. And we are going to get to the Olympics. And coming out of that Olympic break is going to be a hellacious grind. Hell, the grind to the Olympics is going to be hellacious. A lot of teams are going to have 4-game weeks for the next 2 months. 4-game weeks, when it feels like you can score 2 goals consistently, are going to feel like pulling teeth. With this much of a compressed schedule, with this much of a group being in such a wide state of flux as far as mentality and output, I don't have a ton of confidence in this group magically locking in. I think your best bet, and I had said this earlier, your best bet is riding Trocheck, Panarin, and Lafreniere together. You continue doing the Zibanejad, Cooley, Miller experiment as your second line. And candidly, this group needs at least 1, if not 2, more top 9 forwards. I don't think you can seriously get where you want to with a Johnny Brodzinski or a Parsonen as the third line center. And you could say, well, they're doing a good job. Sure, they're getting zone time. That's great. They're not putting the puck in the net enough. We're talking about a 20-goal shortfall here of where they want to be. That's not going to be fixed by grinding out having 54% possession, but 47% of the high danger chances and 46% of the expected goals. It's great to get zone time. It's great they're not negative the way the third and fourth lines have been in years past. But at a certain point, it becomes a matter of rubber meeting the road. You need to produce. And right now, that bottom 6 is a black hole of offense. And the top 6, other than that Panarin line, isn't giving you a whole lot. So it's a real rough question that there probably isn't a straightforward answer for, but you're going to find out really quick. By Christmas, you will know what this team is, and that's a month, 5 weeks away. In a month and a week, we will know what this team is.
The next 4 games, they play Vegas tomorrow, which is Tuesday. They play Colorado. They play Utah, all on the road. And then they come home next Monday and they play St. Louis. It would be so hilariously Rangers if they go in and they beat all 3 of those, really good teams. Vegas is kind of iffy. They've lost a bunch of games in overtime and shootouts, and they just haven't been able to string a bunch of, success there. But Colorado is really good. Utah is on the up and up, even though they've kind of been struggling lately. Like, there's still a team that should be making the playoffs this season with all their talent. And St. Louis is just bad. St. Louis St. Louis is having a harder time scoring goals than the Rangers are.
St. Louis might be the worst team in the NHL. And it
would be very funny if the Rangers went on the road and beat all three of those teams, and then came home with a golden opportunity to win 4 games in a row for the first time in over a calendar month, and they blew it to the worst offensive team in the NHL. It'd be funny. Now, hopefully they win the next, hopefully they win all these, but the fact of the matter is that, to your point, I'm looking at the schedule right now. They play, let's just say that they played 4 games last week because, Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday, that's 4 games. Then they play 3 games this week. They play 4 games next week, even with Thanksgiving. By the way, next week is Thanksgiving. They have 4 games with Thanksgiving. Like, I don't think there's any game Thursday, the Thanksgiving, but they play Boston at 1 p.m. the next day. So better not, maybe stay away from the 7th beer, maybe only have the 6th if you're the Rangers, and maybe be alive for that one a little. It's in Boston, so you would think the Rangers are actually going to play well because it's not at home, but then they have to fly back to New York and then host Tampa Bay, which is at a 2 p.m. time, which is a weird time to play a hockey game. I digress. In 24 hours after that. So to your point, there's not a whole lot of space to breathe for them. There's not a whole lot of time to kind of reset their thought processes of, okay, we've had 8 games and we haven't been able to score a bunch at home. Like, okay, now we have a 4-day break. Let's all just take some time. We're going to chill out. We're going to reset. And then moving forward, we're going to do the X, Y, and Z a little bit differently. There's none of that. It's go time, and then that's it. Like there's no time to breathe here. So
not this year, no.
If you do not fix it on the fly, you're just going to get a repeat of the first 6 weeks of the season. You have to fix it now, or else you just aren't. It's because it's going to snowball, and that's the thing. There was a little bit of progress now that you finally have a win at home against Nashville, but then the next home game you look like that against Detroit. You just didn't play well. And for the Quick looked like the only player that wanted to win the game. And you can't do that to your you can't do that to your fans. You just and I talked about this with Shesterkin a few weeks ago after they lost to, I think it was Carolina, where Shesterkin said that we owe it to our fans to score goals to win games. Okay, well, you scored 1, but you still lost. You didn't play all that well, and it's awesome that you're playing a whole lot better on the road. It's awesome. And the goal is to translate at least a little bit of that to playing that way at home, but you still got to do that. And Detroit's not a good team. You just beat them 10 days ago or 10 days ago now at this point. And you let them lap you at home, which is just embarrassing, really. And okay, so you got Vegas, Colorado, Utah coming up. If you can,
that's a tough stretch.
It's a very tough stretch, especially Colorado. Colorado has, I think, only lost 1 regulation game to this point, and it's we're 6 weeks into the season. Okay, well then show me what you're made of. If you can really go into those 3 spots and win 2 of them, like if you can beat Utah, if you can beat Vegas, if you can be competitive against Colorado, we can have a different, heading into the game against St. Louis on Monday, we're going to have a different conversation on the podcast. But if you go into each of those games and you play like you did against Detroit, this is going to get real bleak real soon.
They have to find a better medium because their average game right now just isn't good enough to win consistently. But real quick, before we wrap up, be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about the late Larry Brooks, who passed away last Thursday. I will be very brief, but Larry is a one of one. That archetype does not exist anymore. There will not be somebody who walks into a newspaper at 21 years old and spends 35 of the next 45 years of their life there. That type of job simply doesn't exist anymore. Columnists are a difficult role to fill. They are expensive. They only write once or twice a week. Publications have shied away and called their editorial desks, both on the news side and on the sports side, for that exact reason. But Larry's staying power, his cultural relevancy was enough that in spite of all of the other cuts around at the Post, they stuck with him. He is one of the voices of hockey of the last 35 to 40 years. This is somebody who, as time passed, I disagreed with more and more of his opinions, but his conviction and his steadfastness in those opinions is not something you see a lot of anymore, especially in the sports media scape, where because nobody has an attention span anymore, you just oscillate based on the given week or day on what your take is going to be. But no, Larry very much was steadfast in this is how you win in the NHL, whether it was all the soliloquies about Josh Anderson, the ones about Matt Rempe. He had his guys and why he believed in them. That type of writing, that type of perspective doesn't really exist anymore. And I hope that the Post doesn't use his passing as an excuse to not have a hockey columnist anymore. I think it is really important that you maintain that tradition of having a hockey voice at your publication, whether that's somebody internally or externally. I do think it's important that the Post keeps that role going. And I do think it would be kind of embarrassing to not keep that role going and use, well, we don't want to try and replace. Well, no one ever replaces.
No,
Larry
you don't
Brooks.
Replace,
but you need to build on that legacy. That is important. That is a very important role. You think about all of the people across the hockey media landscape and all of the other markets who had some anecdote to share, some story to tell, because that's how long he was both on the beat and then subsequently worked as a columnist. That is important. Giving your readership that type of access, that type of insight is a reason to subscribe to the Post, is a reason to look past what the rest of the New York Post is. But that matters. And it's weird that Larry won't be out here writing a column a week before the trade deadline, calling them a bunch of gutless cowards the way he did last year, because it's sorely needed every now and then.
Anderson on the team.
Of course, always wanting Josh Anderson on the team.
Yeah, I mean, Larry really was a pillar of the community, and as I said earlier, and he's somebody that you can't replace. Like, the New York Post isn't going to replace Larry Brooks. The point is to find someone that can carry on that legacy. Somebody that, whether that's Molly, whether that's somebody else, but whomstever that they deem worthy enough to fill his shoes. Somebody that can take on that kind of strong stance on things and not be afraid to back down. Larry Brooks has never backed down from anything ever in the history of his entire life. Larry Brooks stood on, he was fighting with Tortorella, even though, from what I've heard, they've since fixed that in recent years. He was fighting with John Tortorella. He fought Dan Boyle. He was never afraid of taking on the aggressor in the locker room. But because he's Larry Brooks, he wasn't doing it for a clip. He wasn't doing it for a highlight. And everybody in the organization, as well as in the NHL, knew that about him. This was his raw, genuine opinion, which is his job to produce. And if you don't like it, that's fine. But that's who Larry Brooks is, and that's who he always was. And that is something that I think everybody, whether you work in sports or otherwise, you should be sticking by that. You need to be headfast in your approach to the way that you talk about your job, right? If you're a reporter, your number one job is, okay, here's the truth, and I'm going to write about it. And yeah, for sports, it's a little bit more opinionated with the Josh Anderson stuff, the Rempe stuff, sure, but at the core of everything, Larry Brooks wanted to tell the truth, and he wanted to tell stories. And he was never somebody to shy away from writing something because, what if, this guy won't like it? Okay, well then if you don't like it, Larry Brooks, is in the locker room after every game. Come talk to me after the game. We'll talk about it. That's the kind of attitude Larry Brooks had, and it's something that I very much respect. And yeah, sure, he had opinions that I didn't agree with, you didn't agree with, and whatever. But at the core, he was somebody that really cared so much cared about the game and the stories and the people around the sport. And hopefully his spirit doesn't die out, and if anything, it grows stronger because there's so much positive conversation around Larry Brooks happening right now, that maybe there's a 14-year-old that is reading a bunch of these, stories about him now and wants to become the next Larry Brooks, wants to be, the next generation of storyteller. And that's what we all aspire to be. So hopefully, Larry rests peacefully, and hopefully, his family is doing okay. My condolences to his loved ones and his family and friends, and hopefully, we get more of Larry Brooks to come, and not less of it.
Yeah, it's one of the real struggles in media today is finding authentic voices who have actual beliefs, and it's going to be weird not having that once every 2 months where Larry wasn't always batting 1,000 anymore, but every now and then when he needed to throw fire, he was more than willing to do it. I mean, last year, he was the one person who relatively early on started calling it for what it was. Last year's team that just never put it together and was a massive disappointment. And it takes conviction, and you need to have a certain baseline level of credibility to take those shots, to call BS when you see it. It's really hard to build credibility. It takes a long time. It's really easy to lose it, but it is integral that the Post keeps that tradition on of having a weekly hockey column, whether that's internal or an external hire. That needs to live on. And I don't want to hear anything about budgetary constraints or, well, no one's going to read it if it's not Larry. No, make it important. It is not impossible to carry on a legacy. You might have to reimagine it, you might have to reinvent it, but it is integral that the Post keeps that going. That'll do it for this week's Liberty Blue. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts or over on YouTube. Go check out Molly Walker's column about her reflections about working with Larry. It's really good stuff and something that I think will put a little bit of color as to why Larry was so important. We will talk to you guys next week.
Later.